Today, June 6th, 2024, marks the 80th anniversary of the storming of Normandy on D-Day. The United States and its allies stormed the beaches of Normandy June 6, 1944. Between that date and the end of the war in the European theater, there are 552,117 American casualties, including 104,812 Americans killed in action. On D-Day alone, this day 80 years ago, some 2,501 Americans were killed storming Normandy. So why was the war necessary? I know this seems like a stupid question, but there are a bunch of people today who don't understand why the war was necessary. The answer is because the Nazis were, in fact, an evil regime hell-bent on global domination with the imposition of their vile system of government and their supremacist ideology on the globe. And as we know, World War II also led directly into the next righteous war, the Cold War, wherein the United States-led free world squared off against the Soviet Union, an empire perhaps even more evil, if possible, than the Nazi empire. Americans saved the world not once, but twice. It is that simple. Had America not intervened in World War II, the end of the war would have been German domination of the European continent. It was American naval resupply of the United Kingdom that allowed the UK to survive the German Navy's attempted blockade of the island nation, even in the years leading up to the United States' direct entry into the war. Upon learning that the United States was entering the war, Winston Churchill later wrote, quote, "Being saturated and satiated with emotion and sensation, I went to bed and slept the sleep of the saved and thankful." If the United States had not entered the war, if the U.S. had remained truly neutral in the war, which we were not in the lead up to World War II because we were involved in making sure that the UK was resupplied, the UK likely would have been blockaded into starvation and submission. The Nazis would have then turned and cast their eyes east at the Soviet Union, and then they would have poured resources into its submission. And if they didn't have to face the possibility of invasion from the West, they certainly could have won the war in the East. After a period of reconsolidation and strengthening, Hitler's Navy would have then extended its sphere of influence across the Atlantic, shutting down all of the trade routes. There was the real possibility of sympathizers in South and Latin America arising. Meanwhile, America would have continued to face the threat of the Japanese in the Pacific. In May 1941, FDR laid out the stakes of the conflict between the United States and Germany. This, of course, is months before the United States entered the war after December 7th, 1941, the attack on Pearl Harbor, and the German declaration of war on the United States. Here's what FDR said, quote, "The Nazi world does not recognize any God except Hitler, for the Nazis are as ruthless as the communists in their denial of God. What place has religion which preaches the dignity of the human being, the majesty of the human soul, in a world where moral standards are measured by treachery and bribery and fifth columnists? Will our children, too, wander off goose-stepping in search of new gods?" The United States entered the war December 7th, 1941 with Pearl Harbor. The declaration of war came the next day. Germany declared war on the United States on December 11th, 1941. It then took 3 full years for the United States and our allies to put ourselves in position for the liberation of the European continent across the English Channel. Historians at the U.S. Naval Institute suggested that there had to be 4 preconditions of a successful amphibious invasion of France. First, naval superiority in the English Channel. Second, air superiority over the landing beaches and well inland. Enough troops to establish a beachhead and then match the enemy's subsequent buildup. And finally, enough shipping and landing craft to carry the troops to the landing points and reinforce them as required. This took a lot of time. There was a full-scale discussion in Casablanca in 1943 about whether D-Day could have been pushed to 1943. Churchill, the UK, they objected. Churchill thought that the last couple of conditions had not been fulfilled. He said, "I do not believe 27 Anglo-American divisions are sufficient for Overlord," that's the name of the operation for D-Day, "in view of the extraordinary fighting efficiency of the German army and the much larger forces they could so readily bring to bear against our troops, even if the landings were successfully accomplished." By 1944, that had changed. It was go time for the largest amphibious invasion in the history of warfare. Almost 133,000 troops from the United States and our allies landed on the beaches of Normandy on D-Day. Casualties from all of those countries combined during the landing numbered 10,300. By June 30th, 1944, over 850,000 men, 148,000 vehicles, and 570,000 tons of supplies had landed on Normandy shores. Eisenhower, of course, famously issued a letter to the troops as D-Day was about to happen. And here's what he wrote. "Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade." Notice the language. The great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. No embarrassment about the use of Christian terminology here. "The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world. Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944. Much has happened since the Nazi triumphs of 1940-41. The United Nations have inflicted upon the Germans great defeats in open battle man-to-man. Our air offensive has seriously reduced their strength in the air and their capacity to wage war on the ground. Our home fronts have given us an overwhelming superiority in weapons and munitions of war and placed at our disposal great reserves of trained fighting men. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck. Let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking. Signed, Dwight D. Eisenhower from the Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. Now, notice the kind of language that is used there. Language that has been completely lacking in the West pretty much since World War II, the language of total victory. The moral wherewithal to declare the moral superiority of the United States and its allies in the fight. We'll get to more on this in just a moment. First, despite everything the Fed has been trying to do, we're still feeling the effects of inflation. Filling up your car, grocery shopping, home repairs, all that stuff is more expensive. Most of you are paying these bills with a credit card. Credit card debt is at an all-time high. If you're a homeowner, there's a way out. You need to call my friends at American Financing. They can put together a plan to pay off that high-interest credit card debt and create meaningful savings for you every month. They're saving people just like you an average of $854 a month and closing in as fast as 10 days. Don't wait. Get yourself into a better position. Call their salary-based mortgage consultants today. It costs nothing to get started. If you start today, you could delay 2 mortgage payments, giving you greater savings up front. Every day you wait is another day of financial stress. Don't let the cycle of living paycheck to paycheck continue. Take control of your financial future today. Call American Financing at 866-721-3300. If you can't remember that, scroll down to the show description for all the info you need. If you call today, you might not have to make next month's mortgage payment. That's 866-721-3300 or visit AmericanFinancing.net. Trust me, it's something you want to take care of sooner rather than later. NMLS 182334, NMLSConsumerAccess.org. FDR, who of course was president at the time, who ordered the invasion of Normandy on behalf of the Americans, FDR went on the radio the night of D-Day and he issued the following prayer.
I ask you to join with me in prayer. Almighty God, our sons, pride of our nation, this day have set upon a mighty endeavor, a struggle to preserve our republic, our religion, and our civilization, and to set free a suffering humanity. Lead them straight and true. Give strength to their arms, stoutness to their hearts, steadfastness in their faith. They will need thy blessings. Their road will be long and hard. For the enemy is strong. He may hurl back our forces. Success may not come with rushing speed, but we shall return again and again. And we know that by thy grace and by the righteousness of our cause, our sons will triumph.
So, what exactly was the United States? Well, what were our allies hoping to preserve? Well, first and foremost, we were preserving the interests of the United States and a free West, the religion of the West, preserving Christian values in the West. The men who stormed the beaches at Normandy, average age, about 26 of the men who died at Normandy, were invading on behalf of their families and their country and their churches. They were invading on behalf of the Constitution of the United States and its preservation. They were invading on behalf of Christian values in the face of Nazi paganism. And then they would later fight the Cold War against Marxist paganism on behalf of Christian values. They were the greatest generation in part because they were fighting for the greatest values. In 1984, Ronald Reagan spoke on the 40th anniversary of D-Day in Normandy. Here's what he had to say.
These are the boys of Puente Hope. These are the men who took the cliffs.
It was a very moving experience. They were what General Marshall called our secret weapon, the best damn kids in the world. Where do we find them? Where do we find such men? And the answer came almost as quickly as I'd asked the question. Where we've always found them in this country. On the farms, the shops, the stores, and the offices. They just are the product of the freest society the world has ever known.
Joe Biden arrived in Normandy yesterday. He spoke this morning in Normandy. Here's what President Biden said 40 years after Ronald Reagan on the 80th anniversary of D-Day.
We're not far off from the time when the last living voices of those who fought and bled on D-Day will no longer be with us. So we have a special obligation. We cannot let what happened here be lost in the silence of the years to come. We must remember it, must honor it, and live it. And we must remember the fact that they were heroes here that day does not absolve us from what we have to do today. Democracy is never guaranteed. Every generation must preserve it, defend it, and fight for it. That's the test of the ages. In memory of those who fought here, died here, literally saved the world here, let us be worthy of their sacrifice. Let us be the generation that when history is written about our time, in 10, 20, 30, 50, 80 years from now, it'll be said, when the moment came, we met the moment. We stood strong. Our alliances were made stronger. We saved democracy in our time as well. Thank you very much, and may God bless you all. May God protect our troops. Thank you.
The real question for us on the 80th anniversary of D-Day is the question that Reagan asked. Where do we find such men? Because it honestly raises goosebumps to think of the extraordinary heroism and bravery of normal 18, 19-year-old men storming beaches, running uphill into machine gun fire in order to liberate a continent none of them had ever visited. Where do we find such men? And that's a real question. How was the D-Day generation raised? Because that has a lot to do, obviously, with the kind of men that are produced in the greatest generation. Well, the answer is they were raised in church. Church membership in 1937 was 73%. 96% of Americans, according to Gallup, said they believed in God in 1944. A grand total of 4% of all households in the United States were single-parent families in 1940. In other words, the men of the greatest generation were raised by two parents in church-going families that believed in God. It turns out you cannot raise a great generation in a vacuum of values because you can't raise a great generation without raising a good generation. So how are we doing today? Well, today, the American single motherhood rate is 41%, literally 10 times the single motherhood rate in 1937. Only 47% of Americans, a minority of Americans, are members of churches. And of course, the churches of today are significantly watered down from the churches of the 1930s and 1940s, which means that a significant percentage of people who consider themselves members of churches aren't actually receiving anything like biblical values. Just 74% of Americans say they believe in God, and many of those Americans are actually quasi-agnostic and believe in something spiritual that doesn't demand anything of them. The United States has spent the 4 generations since D-Day removing all the supporting institutions of American life, exploding American values in the name of a heedless picture of emotive individualism in which your feelings are all that matters. Because it turns out that going to church instills in you a belief that you are part of something bigger and something more important. Without that, there is no more greatest generation, only an obnoxiously self-involved generation. And so I want to spend some time on what was going on culturally yesterday and today in the country, because it's indicative of where we are. What exactly is the generation that we have raised? What is my generation or my parents' generation? What are those generations? The answer is self-involved, dedicated to the proposition that their feelings are literally the most important things in the world, built against traditional values and traditional institutions and traditional structures. A generation so eggshell skulled that a tap on the skull caves it in. To go from the sublime and the dignified to the absolutely ridiculous, but the important. I present to you a clip of a person named Ray J. We'll get to more on this in just one moment. First, today, June 6th, marks the 80th anniversary of the Allied invasion of Normandy, more commonly known as D-Day. Our good friends at Black Rifle Coffee are doing something special to commemorate the incredible men who stormed those beaches by land, air, and sea 80 years ago. Evan Hafer and his team have been making a series of parachute jumps into Normandy, with today being their last jump, fully decked out in World War II-era uniforms. As time marches on, the Black Rifle Coffee crew is making sure they do their part to honor the last of the greatest generation who fought at D-Day while they are still with us. Black Rifle Coffee, not only they make awesome coffee, they also happen to be veteran-founded, veteran-run. They proudly serve coffee and culture to people who love the country. A portion of every purchase made at blackriflecoffee.com supports veteran and first responder causes. From providing funding and equipment to first responders to helping veterans fight cancer, your money goes a long way toward giving back to those who serve our nation. Visit blackriflecoffee.com to join us and the team of veterans commemorating the hard-fought victory at D-Day. That's blackriflecoffee.com. Get the best coffee in the country and help out veterans at the same exact time. Head over to blackriflecoffee.com to get started this D-Day, blackriflecoffee.com. So Ray J is, of course, a famous musician, I suppose, who once was on a tape with Kim Kardashian. And when the history of our era is written, it will be said that one of the signal influences on people of the younger generation was a tape between two B-list celebrities. And that actually changed the direction of the world. Why? Because in a sea of nihilism, chaos, and stupidity, it turns out it doesn't take a very strong wind to change the direction of the ship. Ray J was appearing on the Shannon Sharpe show, and Shannon Sharpe asked him about the impact of that tape, the most famous tape probably in world history. And here's what Ray J had to say. He's actually correct about this.
How different is that family, or is that family life?
You know, I think more of the question is, how different would we all be? How different would this whole thing be? How different would the industry be? How different would the wheel roll? Everything would be different. We would all be different. All of us. Everybody in here would be different. We would have on different clothes.
What you mean?
Everything would be different, meaning like you would never ask me that question. Meaning if we sat here right now, and we got to this point, what, like, I don't know, probably more people would be going to college and, you know what I'm saying, getting an education to be successful. There might not be any OnlyFans and other things like that, other opportunities like that. So, I mean, are we a part of the cure? Are we a part of the disease? I don't know. All I know is I'm just trying to make it right.
He was then asked whether he was ashamed at the revelation of that tape. He said, I wasn't at the time, but now that I have kids, I am. It turns out that a society that's devoted to kids, a society built around raising healthy children, is a healthy society. A society that is built around your feelings is a very unhealthy society. And it is that society that we have proceeded to build. And we are educating our children, what are left of them, in this cult of individual emotivism. This, of course, is Pride Month, the most important month on the calendar. So some of us take, D-Day more seriously than, say, a month devoted to sexual proclivities. But when it comes to the mainstream media and the White House, the reality is that the powers that be in our culture take much more seriously Pride Month than they do the sacrifices of the men who died on D-Day. On a comparative level, I promise you, the amount of media coverage for Pride Month, the celebration of Pride Month, is going to be significantly larger over the course of the month than the 80th anniversary of D-Day, which will last in media coverage for approximately a day and a half to remind us that Joe Biden is very old and that we're at war by proxy in Ukraine and all the rest. And then it'll go away and we'll go back to Pride Month. A California state senator named Scott Weiner, who's an incredible radical leftist on matters sexually related, among others, he gave a rather amazing statement yesterday. He was talking about Pride Month and children. Now, again, the way we raise our kids is the future of the country. The greatest generation was raised by parents, by someone. Here is how Scott Weiner suggests that we raise our children.
We are always there for these kids. These are our kids, and we need to make sure that we are lifting them up and giving them a path to success. So we are working very hard to make that happen. And because we now, and this shows that representation matters, 10% of the California legislature is now LGBTQ, 12 out of 120.
The heroism of the new generation, flanked by gay pride flags and trans flags. He stands there talking about raising the next generation. And of course, our culture has signed into the chat as well, our cultural powers that be. Disney Plus, they have a new Star Wars series. Now, of course, many of us grew up on Star Wars. You know, classic battles of good versus evil, in which, honestly, most of the battles are modeled on World War II air battles, in which the Empire is clearly a stand-in for the Nazis. Well, now, Disney Plus has decided it's time to shift the narrative a little bit. It's time for something different. It's time to indoctrinate small children in the cult of Pride Month. This is how we must raise our children. So Amandla Stenberg, who is the lead actress on a new Star Wars series on Disney Plus called The Acolyte, along with Leslie Headland, creator and showrunner, explain that The Acolyte, again, a show designed for children, about my kid's age, is the gayest show ever. This is very important stuff for our generation.
I want to ask you both because this is, I would say, arguably the gayest Star Wars, I think, by a considerable margin. And are you excited about that? Are you
Not
bracing
the gayest
yourself?
Star Wars. Not the.
It's pretty gay, let's be honest. Leslie, how do you feel?
Am I gay? Yes.
Well, no, I know you are gay, but I'm asking, are you excited about putting this, this is going to be a talking point?
Is it going to be a talking point?
I'm sure so.
Because nerds are gay.
Was this the fun element of it?
No, I don't think so. And yet people have told me that it's the gayest Star Wars, and I frankly...
You're offended?
Into it. No.
I think that Star Wars is so gay already.
Okay.
I mean, have you seen the fits? We'd be like, look how gay this is, and then send each other a reference photo.
And are you telling me, with a straight face, that C-3PO is straight?
They're a couple. That's what I think. But this is more outward.
I think it's canon that R2-D2 is a lesbian.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
This is how they're raising our kids. By the way, both of the women in this particular clip are lesbians, the lead actress as well as the showrunner and creator of The Acolyte. And is that how you produce a generation of children who actually think beyond themselves? Or is this how you produce generations of kids who think only of themselves in every context? There's more on this in a moment. First, when we started the Daily Wire, the biggest question mark was what we would do for HR. Honestly, we were not even thinking about HR because we were doing, the hard work of creating awesome content. It was difficult to find a managing professional capable of handling those day-to-day HR tasks. If that sounds like you or your company, you need to talk to my friends over at Bambee. With Bambee, you're not just getting an HR manager, you're getting a dedicated partner who's available by phone, email, and real-time chat. They'll handle crucial tasks like employee onboarding, terminations, and performance reviews. With Bambee's HR Autopilot feature, you can streamline essential HR practices like employee training and feedback procedures, freeing up your time for what really matters to your business. All of Bambee's HR managers are based in the United States and can support the nuances across all 50 states. HR managers can easily cost $80,000 annually, but Bambee starts at just $99 monthly. So, no matter the size of your business, Bambee can work for you. Don't wait another minute. Schedule your free consultation by visiting Bambee.com right now. Type Ben Shapiro under podcast when you sign up, spelled BAMBEE.com, Bambee.com. Type in Ben Shapiro to get started today. Bambee.com, type in Ben Shapiro. Amandla Stenberg went even further, of course. She says that the goal of The Acolyte is to make white people cry. Is this the kind of American unity that leads to American sacrifice? Again, it is hard to juxtapose these, just emotionally. It's hard to juxtapose D-Day with the current generation because it's like walking into an alien world filled with stupid people who believe only in their own emotional self-centeredness. It's really pathetic, and it's really terrible. Here is Amandla Stenberg talking about how she hopes that white people are offended by her. I can't believe that this show's going to bomb, that it'll be a giant dud and no one will allow their kids to watch it. Here she is explaining to Trevor Noah that the goal of the show is to make white people cry.
When people watch The Hate U Give, what do you want them to walk away with? Because I know everyone has a slightly different feeling.
Well, I mean, white people crying actually was the goal. It was the goal.
Yeah, that's great. As always, reverse the races and you see how racist this is. If you ever said that a show or a movie were about making black people cry, it would be the most racist thing ever. But this is the generation, a self-centered generation where they are the only people that matter. And we are literally raising our kids across the country in order to believe in this new God, a new God that was rejected by generations of Americans before who used to worship the God of the Bible and no longer do. Piece by Chris Rufo, who does amazing work over at City Journal, talking about the education of our children. Quote, Portland, Oregon has earned its reputation as America's most radical city. I've obtained a collection of publicly accessible documents produced by the Portland Association of Teachers, an affiliate of the State Teachers Union that encourages its more than 4,500 members to teach Palestine. The The lesson plans are steeped in radicalism. They begin teaching the principles of decolonization to students as young as 4 and 5 years old. For pre-kindergarten kids, the union promotes a workbook from the Palestinian Feminist Collective, which tells the story of a fictional Palestinian boy named Amandla. When I was only 10 years old, I had to flee my home in Palestine, the boy tells readers. A group of bullies called Zionists wanted our land, so they stole it by force and hurt many people. Students are encouraged to come up with a slogan. They can chant at a protest and complete a maze so Amandla can, quote, get back home to Palestine, represented as a map of Israel. In kindergarten through second grade, the ideologies intensify. The teachers' union recommends a lesson, Art and Action for Palestine, that teaches students that Israel, like America, is an oppressor. The objective is to connect histories of settler colonialism from Palestine to the United States and to celebrate Palestinian culture and resistance throughout history and in the present with a focus on Palestinian children's resistance. This is the way that many on the left in the United States have been trying to teach kids for years. And the emotive individualism that is taught by the left in reality is a guise for simply tearing down the institutions that made America great, that created the greatest generation, that provided the moral foundation for the greatest generation. You can't tear away those foundations without tearing away the ability of people to thrive, to be strong, to do the heroic things. You cannot ask heroic things of a group of people you have raised to be non-heroic. When you decide that the most heroic people are people who are involved in false self-expression, a thing that Joe Biden has literally said. He says the bravest people that he knows are quote-unquote transgender kids. When your definition of bravery, I've made this joke before, but it's not really a joke. When you say that the definition of bravery is you misidentifying your own gender, as opposed to, storming the beaches at Normandy on behalf of family, religion, faith, freedom, the Constitution of the United States, and putting your life at risk, it may be a throwaway line to Joe Biden, but it betrays something deeper, which is our very definition of what it means to be a heroic and brave human being has changed. And we have raised entire generations in this cult. And then we are surprised when it turns out that we have a hard time recruiting for the military, when it turns out that it's hard to get young people in America to understand that America historically is a great force in the world, not a good force, a great force in the world. We are surprised when we learn that people across the political spectrum in the United States who are young are having a tough time understanding American history and are somehow finding sympathy with the world's worst human beings. When you raise an absolutely unfettered generation, what you get is not a generation of enlightened little tots. What you end up with is a destructive set of radioactive isotopes walking around society and decaying everything in their path. And that is what we are facing in the United States. Again, conservatism, Americanism, American values, those things, it's not a lie, begin at home. They begin locally. The power of government that has been used to destroy that on behalf of a different ideology is the great tragedy of American history. You cannot have D-Day without a generation capable of actually storming beaches. And that's something Americans ought to remember as they have their own children and raise them. These are all decisions that we have to make together in order to make sure that we actually have an America capable of preserving itself and an America worth preserving. We'll get to more on this in a moment. First, betting with BetOnline. It's a lot of fun. You can wager on real-world events like the outcome of the presidential election. It's going to be Trump, or sports events like the Stanley Cup Final. I was on BetOnline today. I was looking at the series line for the Florida Panthers versus the Edmonton Oilers. Producer Jess, a lifelong Panthers fan, makes it easier to root for the favorite, the Florida Panthers, who are in fact going to win. BetOnline makes sports betting more accessible and convenient than ever before. With just a few clicks, you can place bets on your favorite teams or events from the comfort of your own home. BetOnline prides themselves on their higher-than-average betting limits of up to $25,000. You can increase your wagering amounts by contacting their player services desk by phone or email. So, while you're watching your favorite team or the news on upcoming elections, why not spice things up with a friendly wager with BetOnline? Head on over to betonline.ag to place your bets today. Use promo code BEN for a 50% instant deposit bonus of up to $1,000. That's betonline.ag. Use promo code BEN. BetOnline, the options are endless. Why not spice up the sports game tonight by heading on over to betonline.ag and use promo code BEN for that 50% instant deposit bonus of up to $1,000. Okay, meanwhile, the Joe Biden campaign continues to stumble ever onward. Believe it or not, we still have 5 months until the election. I know this campaign is absolutely endless. Joe Biden is apparently extremely upset that people have noticed that he is senile. According to Politico, for much of Joe Biden's time in office, the White House has held the Wall Street Journal's news operation in high regard. That makes sense. The Wall Street Journal's news operation is actually to the left of the New York Times by studies. Their op-ed page is conservative. their news operation is to the left. The paper's reporters have often been selected to ask questions at Biden's press conferences. The White House has regularly worked with them privately on stories. But that relationship is now under serious strain following the Journal's own publication of a lengthy story on the president's health and mental acuity. That story, based on what the paper said, were more than 45 interviews over several months, cast Biden as discursive and distracted, mumbling and non-attentive. It presented anecdotes in which the president would read from note cards in meetings with lawmakers, speak in hushed tones, and seemingly stumble over his own administration's policies. Inside the West Wing, staff interpreted the piece as a sign the paper was reverting to partisan form ahead of the November election. But of course, that's ridiculous. The reality here is that everyone knows that Joe Biden is falling apart. Everybody understands that the reason the story landed is because Joe Biden is falling apart. And so Joe Biden has to come up with an alternative tactic. And Joe Biden's campaign in 2020 was predicated on the idea that Donald Trump was too volatile to be president, that he would be a return to stability. And it turns out that he has not only not made things more stable, he has radically exacerbated the instability in American society, 40-year highs in inflation, two major conflagrations on the world stage, a social fabric that continues to decay at a radioactive half-life rate. So he is now relegated to his final argument. And this is going to be the final argument of the Biden campaign, which is if Donald Trump is elected, he will be a dictator. This is going to be the final move by the Biden campaign. The problem for him, of course, is that he has used the government in dictatorial ways, including his own party targeting his political opponent for jail time, which I now think is probably probable as opposed to possible. But according to the Washington Post, Biden seeking to cast Trump as would-be authoritarian. Well, yes, we know. President Biden arrived in France on Wednesday for an election year visit. In coming days, he plans to commemorate the 80th anniversary of D-Day in World War II and deliver a high-profile speech on democracy. Biden is seeking to contrast himself with former President Donald Trump, who Biden's campaign is casting as a would-be authoritarian. Now, again, the idea that Donald Trump is the orange Hitler, and you're going to make that case while standing near the graves of people who died to fight Hitler, is pretty sick. What Biden is now attempting to predicate this latest ridiculous argument on is Donald Trump suggesting that turnabout is fair play in politics, and that if Joe Biden is going to allow the DOJ to prosecute his political opponents, maybe Donald Trump will allow the same. Here was Donald Trump on Newsmax saying something like that.
Wouldn't it really be bad, with like, as an example, Hillary, with the hammering of her cell phones and all of the things she did, but wouldn't it be terrible to throw the president's wife and the former Secretary of State, think of it, the former Secretary of State, but the president's wife into jail? Wouldn't that be a terrible thing? But they want to do it. So, it's a terrible, terrible path that they're leading us to. And it's very possible that it's going to have to happen to them.
Okay, so that is not Donald Trump pledging to prosecute his political opponents. He literally says in that quote, it's a terrible thing that they are doing. And once you've opened this Pandora's box, you don't know what's going to come out of it. That's no different from Mitch McConnell, the Senate minority leader at the time, telling Democrats that if they destroy the judicial filibuster, it would come around to bite them. So Donald Trump right there is not saying, I'm going to falsely prosecute my political opponents. But Joe Biden is taking it that way because everything is a giant game of gaslighting. So the Biden-Harris headquarters put out a statement, quote, Donald Trump confirms plans to jail opponents. These people do not own a mirror. They don't own a mirror. They are literally trying to jail Donald Trump right now. On July 11th, there will be a hearing to determine if Donald Trump goes to jail in the middle of an election cycle where he is currently leading the imbecilic president of the United States. Here is Biden-Harris campaign, quote, reeling and increasingly unhinged from his own felony convictions, Trump raising plans to jail his political opponents is just the latest proof. He will do anything to regain power, preserve his own freedom, and seek revenge on anyone who opposes him. It's unbelievable, the level of projection here. They literally unleashed the DOJ to indict Trump in two separate federal jurisdictions while acquitting Biden himself from classified documents mishandling because he's an old, decrepit, senile dotard. Meanwhile, there are two other Democratic Party lackeys, one of whom has successfully prosecuted Trump in New York and one who's trying to do so in Georgia. But Trump is the threat to democracy because he's threatening to jail his political opponents? Are you kidding me? The statement continues. Trump is pledging to rule as dictator on day one. That's not what he said. He said he wouldn't be a dictator except on day one as a joke when he said that he would use executive orders to close the border, which guess who's supposedly trying to do that right now? Joe Biden. Punish his enemies, embrace violence done on his behalf, and warns of a bloodbath if he loses. Again, that's just a lie. He did not warn that there would be a physical bloodbath. He said there would be an economic bloodbath if Joe Biden is president. But the lying Biden-Harris campaign continues, quote, "The warning signs are clear for all to see. Trump is a danger to our Constitution, a threat to our democracy. So consumed by his own failed, diminished state, he has gone off the deep end." His failed, diminished state? Diminished? Joe Biden is labeling Donald Trump diminished? Pot? Kettle? But this is going to be the final gasp of the Biden campaign. This is going to be their closing argument. They're having to make it 6 months, 5 months in advance of the election. We'll get to more on this in just 1 second. First, folks, let's talk about something that every dude needs in the grooming arsenal. Here it is. Razors that actually work. Jeremy's second-gen razors are here. They are not just any razors. They are bigger, better, blacker, a #1 bestseller on Amazon. So what makes these razors so great? Well, first off, the new second-gen razors are radically redesigned from top to bottom. Behold. They come with an ergonomic handle that ensures superior durability and comfort. The blades, sharper and longer lasting, providing you the smoothest shave every time. They are also not made in China. You've got options as well. Behold the Sprint 3, perfect for a quick, clean shave. The new and improved Precision 5 is your go-to for an exceptionally smooth and close shave. Both feature a lubricating strip infused with argan oil and aloe to moisturize your skin as you shave, along with a precision trimmer for those hard-to-reach areas. While other companies are busy with their DEI and ESG, Jeremy's razors focuses on what really matters. You know, shaving. Let's be clear. We're not keeping Black Jeremy around to pander to the DEI crowd. He's here because who doesn't want to hang with Black Jeremy? So, what are you waiting for? Head on over to Amazon right now. Grab one of those best-selling razors. Your face will thank you. You'll be shaving with the #1 bestseller on Amazon. It's time to upgrade your shave. Say goodbye to those woke companies that don't align with your values. Okay, meanwhile, as we say, as Joe Biden slips, and I mean, he is slipping. Not physically yet, although I think that's going to happen. As I've suggested for a while here, my prediction in the betting markets is that Joe Biden will suffer some sort of serious health incident between now and the election. Being president is a tough job. Joe Biden is not up to that job. And again, that is Chekhov's gun hanging over the mantelpiece in Act 1. The chances that there's a serious health crisis involving the current president of the United States, there was for Hillary in 2016, and she was like a decade younger than Joe Biden is right now. But the final closing argument for the Biden campaign is what it was ever since January 6th, which is Donald Trump is a threat to the republic, yada, yada, yada. And now they're trotting out all the old masters of the game. Chris Matthews, I'm going to say he's back, which is pretty exciting for me because it means I get to do my Chris Matthews impersonation. He's back on myself. He say, got on up there, roll out of bed, come out of the show, coming in all rumpled, a suit. Looks like I've been dry cleaning 27 years. Tell my wife Kathleen I'm going into the studio. I got to talk about Donald Trump being a dictator in front of some sort of green screen backdrop at the Capitol. Just going to babble nonsensically with my old wardrobe, not looking as good as I was a few years ago. Everyone, as they get older, gradually turns into Michael Moore, including Chris Matthews. Go!
And I'm telling you, Trump could end up rolling the score. I've got the Congress. I've got the Supreme Court. I own it all. I am a dictator. It's very reasonable to assume that's where he's headed.
It's very reasonable to assume he's going to become a dictator. Is that a reasonable thing to assume? Are the institutions of American government so weak that they cannot withstand Donald Trump tweeting dumb things? I think we know the answer to that because we tried it once before and it didn't happen. In fact, it turns out that the quickest way to a dictatorship, if you're going to talk seriously about democracies turning into dictatorship, is a gradual evolution of centralization of power in the executive authority. You know who's doing a lot of that sort of thing and did a lot of it before? The Democratic Party. If you're going to talk about which party has aggregated more authority in the executive branch over the course of the last 30 years, there's no question that the answer is the Democratic Party. Joe Biden has usurped to his own authority the ability to force 80 million Americans to take a vaccine, to relieve trillions in student loan debt, to single-handedly open and close the border and open and close it some more, to declare that states can't even enforce their own laws with regard to the border. Joe Biden has said that he's going to ignore the Supreme Court. Joe Biden has militarized the DOJ in unprecedented ways. But Donald Trump is going to be the dictator? This is a dog that's just not going to want to hunt. Meanwhile, Joy Reid, again, MSNBC, intellectual luminaries over there. Honestly, every time you tune into MSNBC, it's like the opening scene in Amadeus where the priest is wandering through the asylum. So here you have Joy Reid, who somehow has a show on television. The only thing that can be said for Joy Reid is at least she's not Brianna Joy Gray. And she says that GOP colleagues want to get FBI agents killed, which is weird since the entire Democratic Party in 2020 seemed perfectly fine with wide-scale riots on the predicate that law enforcement was racist. But here we go.
Why would they do this? Do they want to get FBI agents killed?
In service of one man, one now felon, 34 counts. I'm so proud of the New York system that the rule of law held, that we had by all reports, from reporters in the courtroom, the judge, the lawyers on both sides, prosecutor and defense, and 12 citizen strangers who did their job. Why are my colleagues doing it? In service and protection of a single man.
Yeah.
As the Attorney General has said, and I have been blowing the whistle, Joy, for 6 years on this committee, they are spewing misinformation and lies to deceive the American people and to tear down our belief in our system of justice.
I swear, listening to these people gaslight us about the justice system, the same people who have declared for literally my entire lifetime that the justice system is inherently racist because too many black men are going to prison or some such. It's pathetic. It really is quite pathetic. Now, the chances that Donald Trump is going to be sentenced to a jail sentence are pretty good at this point. One of the reasons is because Trump's Georgia election interference case has now been paused by an appellate court because the state is considering whether or not DA Fani Willis should be disqualified since she was stooping a prosecutor that she hired and apparently using state funds allegedly to foster their budding romantic relationship in the worst Hallmark movie of all time. So that case has been postponed. The chances are that's going to go beyond the election. The DOJ's cases in Florida, that's going to go beyond the election. The Washington, D.C. case is going to go beyond the election, which means that the Democratic-run justice system, the parts of it that are Democrat-run, they have basically one shot and one shot only at jailing Trump before the election. That's Merchan in New York, July 11th. So mark your calendar. That's the date on which, again, I think there's a high probability that Merchan tries to sentence Donald Trump to jail time. If not to jail time, then certainly to some form of home arrest. That would be my prediction, because Merchan isn't going to go all this way and then not actually drop the other shoe. Meanwhile, Hunter Biden continues to be on trial for his very obvious violation of federal gun law. According to the Wall Street Journal, Hunter Biden's ex-wife and ex-girlfriend took to the witness stand Wednesday in his federal gun trial as prosecutors tried to convince jurors he had lied about his drug use during a 2018 firearm purchase. Zoe Keston, a woman who dated Hunter Biden in 2018, testified about meeting Biden in December 2017 at a strip club in Manhattan where she was working. Again, Hunter Biden is just such a wonderful person. He's the smartest person Joe Biden knows, which is why he meets all of his paramours at strip clubs. Obviously the best place to find long-term stable commitments. Well, either that or, your brother's widow. She said that throughout their relationship, she saw him smoking crack cocaine sometimes every 20 minutes, which is, one hell of a re-upping strategy, apparently. Meanwhile, the Hunter Biden defense is trying to claim that when he filled out the form and it says, "Are you a drug abuser?" and he said no, that what he meant was he didn't use drugs that day. That is not going to hold. Here is a CNN legal analyst explaining that this is Joey Jackson saying, no, that is not a good case.
Do prosecutors have to prove that Hunter was using drugs on the day that he filled out that federal gun form?
Simple answer, good morning, Allison, is no, right? It's about addiction, and we've just seen the form and what the form represents. Big picture before the small picture. As a practitioner in federal and state court on the defense side, and we look there, are you an unlawful user of or addicted to marijuana or any depressant, stimulant, narcotic drug, or any other controlled substance? It does not reference, Allison, the specific day at issue, and I think that's what prosecutors will do. They'll take the broader view with respect to his addiction, which is what they're laying out. And of course, his attorneys are rightfully, Mr. Lowell, is pointing to the notion of the time itself.
I mean, it's the most absurd contention of all time in this particular case. Meanwhile, the House GOP Oversight Committee is now referring both Hunter Biden and James Biden, the brother of Joe Biden. Again, every member of the Biden family has gotten rich off of Biden's name. That's literally why he got into politics. Joe Biden got into politics specifically in order to help out members of his family to get rich. And this is very clear from multiple biographies of Joe Biden. He's a lifelong corrupt Paul. And now they're going to be referred to prosecution to the Biden DOJ. So good luck with that. But the basic allegation is that both Hunter and James committed perjury when they talked to the committee about their financial relationships with various entities. That is probably true. And it's hard to imagine they did not commit some form of perjury. Meanwhile, the DOJ continues to stonewall on tape of Joe Biden talking to Robert Hur because the last thing they want is actual audio tape of Joe Biden stumbling all over himself like an Alzheimer's patient at the local old age home. Here's Democratic Representative Dan Goldman, who's very upset that anybody would call for the release of the tape. He says that's only partisan. Well, I noticed that it is also only partisan to hold back the tape, if that's the game we're playing here.
The reason everyone's asking for it, I think from the media perspective and the American public, is because Special Counsel Hur concluded that there were issues with Biden's memory. Right? I mean, that's the reason. It's not actually a legal reason.
Special Counsel Hur said that. He also said in the course of the interview that President Biden has a photographic memory. And ultimately, you have the transcript. So if you have issues with his memory or with what he said, you have the transcript. You have the substance of it. The only reason for the audio is for political partisan purposes to help Donald Trump.
Well, the only reason to hold back the audio is because you're so embarrassed that Joe Biden sounds like he can no longer speak English if pressed for more than 20 minutes at a time and not drugged up in the back room by his lackeys. We'll get to more on this in just a moment. First, Responsible Man is the newest company from Daily Wire Venture, and they're dedicated to bringing you the best high-quality men's health products without the woke pile of crap on top. Today, our modern diets are often deficient in key vitamins and minerals, leaving us feeling weakened. That's why we created the Emerson multivitamin. Behold! It's physician formulated, made with 33 premium ingredients designed for the dudes. The Emerson multivitamin has health benefits, including helping to fill nutrient gaps, maintaining energy production, sharpening brain cognition, and supporting the health of your heart and muscles. Your new daily multivitamin comes in a sleek black aluminum tin filled with smooth, easy-to-take green capsules and is mint essenced for a refreshing vitamin experience. With Father's Day around the corner, there's no better time to invest in your health. And to the ladies listening, it's a perfect way to support the dude in your life. Show him you care by helping him be his best self. The Responsible Man Father's Day sale is going on right now. Save 30% off the Emerson multivitamin during this sale. Visit responsibleman.com. Facts don't care about your feelings. Neither does your health. Go right now to responsibleman.com. Take advantage of their 30% off sale. That's responsibleman.com. Meanwhile, the Democrats are attempting a secondary line. And again, this is an attempt to drive out the black vote. Joe Biden realizes that he's not going to win over moderates. He's having a very, very tough time with moderates in the polling. And so he is hoping to double down on the Obama coalition. The problem is, how to get black voters excited about an 81-year-old geriatric moron who says kind of racist things on a regular basis? The answer is you accuse your political opponents of racism. Well, Democrats found an awkward fit the other day. They decided to accuse Byron Donalds, a black Republican congressman from Florida, of racism. Now, how exactly was he racist? Well, he was talking about the fact that the single motherhood rate in the black community in the United States has increased dramatically since the beginning of the welfare state. And here is what he apparently said. This is a report from the Philadelphia Inquirer. He said, he was talking about the reinvigoration of black family. He said that people were forming nuclear family units and, quote, helping to breathe the revival of a black middle class in America. And then he said, you see, during Jim Crow, the black family was together. During Jim Crow, more black people were not just conservative. Black people have always been conservative-minded, but more black people voted conservatively. And then HEW, Lyndon Johnson, you go down that road, and now we are where we are. That is a reference to the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. Those are Great Society programs. Okay, so that is not a defense of Jim Crow. That is him labeling the time period. What he is saying is, correctly, that in 1960, black Americans with children were typically married, which is true. And it is true that the black middle class actually expanded faster in the pre-Great Society era than in the post-welfare era. That welfare led to the dissolution of the family structure in the black family. That the welfare programs that were instituted lowered the curve of economic growth for black Americans. Thomas Sowell has done extensive work on all of this. In fact, here is a chart. I like charts. Here is a chart of what single motherhood looks like in the United States from 1952 to 2007. And what you can see here is that single motherhood in the black community in 1952 was in the low 20s in terms of percentage. And today it is in excess of 70%. 70% of kids who are born to black families in the United States are born to single mothers today, as opposed to about 20% back in 1952. And you can see the radical spike beginning, wait for it, with the beginning of the Great Society programs. You can also see, by the way, that the Great Society programs had an incredibly negative effect on single motherhood literally across the board in the United States. If you get the white, non-Hispanic single motherhood rate in the United States in 1952, it was 4 or 5% maybe. Today, it's well in excess of 30%. So it's not unique to the black community. Welfare programs basically destroyed the family structure in the United States. But because he said Jim Crow period, this has now been taken by the left to suggest that Byron Donalds, a black man, is defending Jim Crow, which is unbelievably stupid. Here is Hakeem Jeffries playing this cynical game. That somehow Byron Donalds is the real racist. Nailed it right here. Nailed it.
Mr. Speaker, it has come to my attention that a so-called leader has made the factually inaccurate statement that black folks were better off during Jim Crow. That's an outlandish, outrageous, and out-of-pocket observation. We were not better off when a young boy named Emmett Till could be brutally murdered without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when black women could be sexually assaulted without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when people could be systematically lynched without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when children could be denied a high-quality education without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when people could be denied the right to vote without consequence because of Jim Crow. How dare you make such an ignorant observation?
This is so tiresome. And honestly, if people fall for this, they're stupid. The idea that Byron Donalds is speaking up on behalf of Jim Crow is the dumbest crap. It's so stupid. But I guess when you got nothing else, you just throw whatever's there at the wall, apparently. And they got nothing else. I mean, really, nothing else. Because here's the dirty little secret of the Biden campaign. Waiting in the wings is the worst candidate ever to occupy high office in the United States. I'm talking here about Kamala Harris. I mean, Joe Biden certainly got presidential nomination insurance when he selected Kamala Harris because no one in their right mind would put her at the top of a ticket. Also, if Kamala Harris is not at the center of the 2024 campaign, I don't know why. He's clearly going to die in office. There is no way that Joe Biden finishes a second term. He has markedly declined in the last year. Where do you think he's going? I mean, if you've ever dealt with people who are in a state of cognitive decline, it doesn't look like a straight line arithmetic decline. It looks like an exponential curve in reverse. They go from it's not that bad to it's a little bit more bad to it's a little more bad to it's a lot more bad very, very quickly. The concept that Kamala Harris is not going to finish out a second term is totally crazy. I can't see that happening under any circumstance. So get ready for President Kamala Harris if you reelect Joe Biden, folks. So Kamala Harris was, of course, doing some of the most important TV work she could do. She was on with Jimmy Kimmel, pseudo-comedian, last night, and she was mouthing off about Donald Trump being convicted. Of course, this is a woman, oh my, I can't, it is so hard. The level of smarm on this lady, it's extraordinary. I mean, it's like layers of smarm. She is an onion of smarm. I mean, you take away the top level of smarm and there is yet another layer. She's a Russian nesting doll of smarm. Just her, like everything about her is insincere. She's the most insincere politician I've ever seen. I've seen a lot of insincere politicians, like many, many. And she takes the cake. Here she was going after Donald Trump.
Are the people in the room pretending to not be happy, or how does that go?
I mean, in all seriousness,
yeah.
Just to kind of really level set, let's think about this. A jury of 12 people, peers, over the course of 6 weeks, deliberated on the evidence and facts and unanimously determined guilt for 34 felony counts. There was a defense attorney who actively participated in selecting that jury, who actively made decisions about witnesses to call, witnesses to cross-examine, and the jury made their decision. And, you know, I think that the reality is cheaters don't like getting caught. And being held accountable.
Well, I mean, it's weird that she is so pro the jury system now. Very, very strange. Because, as it turns out, Kamala Harris isn't always pro the jury system. In fact, she still tweets out on the anniversary of Michael Brown's death that Michael Brown was basically murdered. Michael Brown, of course, was shot by Officer Darren Wilson after attempting to grab Darren Wilson's gun, and then there was a grand jury impaneled that acquitted Darren Wilson. She obviously disagrees. Again, all of this newfound enthusiasm for the justice system from Democrats who have spent their entire careers railing about the injustices of the justice system, pretty astonishing stuff. Kamala also, I think I'm going to make it a point of the show to play audio of Kamala Harris because I'm not sure there is a better campaign for Donald Trump than playing audio of Kamala Harris. Here's Kamala Harris talking about abortion.
I decided at a young age I wanted to do the work of fighting to protect women and children from harm. And the idea that these laws would make no exception even for a survivor of a violation to their body And to tell that woman, that person, you don't have a right to make a decision about what happens to your body next, it's immoral. And I think most of us agree one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree the government should not be telling her what to do with her body.
And she blinks very deliberately. A lot of deliberate blinking there from Kamala Harris. You know what? More of that lady. And then we'll see how the American people like that. All right, guys, the rest of the show continues right now. We will be analyzing the new worst person in media, Brianna Joy Gray. I mean, she is truly awful. If you're not a member, become a member, use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all the annual plans. Click the link in the description and join us. When did people decide that free speech didn't matter so much anymore? What's playing out right now at big tech companies is really, really dangerous. It doesn't matter what your politics are, who you voted for. Everyone should have the right to express themselves freely. To fight back against big tech's control of the internet, I use ExpressVPN. Have you ever considered the extent to which free-to-access tech giants invade your privacy for profit? They meticulously track your searches, video history, and every click you make. They construct a detailed profile of you and then sell your sensitive data. That's your privacy they're exploiting. Using the ExpressVPN app on your phone or computer is a simple and effective way to protect your online privacy. The software conceals your IP address from third parties, making it harder for companies to track and sell your data to advertisers. It's your shield against online surveillance. ExpressVPN encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cybercriminals. Stop allowing big tech to revoke your right to free speech. Instead, revoke their right to your data. Secure your internet with the VPN I trust for online protection myself. Visit expressvpn.com/Ben. That's EXPRESSVPN.com/Ben to get 3 extra months for free. expressvpn.com/Ben.